I need to call my dad before I actually get into this video. Hey Dad, how are you? How are you, Dad?
Good. What have you been up to?
Uh, just same old, same old. How about you?
Same old. Hey, I'm stuck the same old, same old.
Yeah, I was calling for actually a specific reason. So I had an idea for a video, and I just wanted to run it by you and see if you're okay with it.
Okay.
The title is "What I Would Do If I Wanted to Save My Dad's Marriage," and so I just kind of wanted to tell from my perspective, like what happened and like if things were to be different, which what could have been done differently. I'm going to explain my perspective on what happened. This is the advice I would give my father if I were to get in a time machine and help him save his marriage with my mom. I'm going to take you through the timeline of how my dad's marriage fell apart. You're going to see how the timeline corresponds with so many similarities, but not just yours, but every other guy I work with. And what I would have told him along that timeline at that point to get my mom back. The whole reason why I do this, other than the pain I experience in relationships from seeing my parents' marriage, is I don't want to see you go through the same pain that my dad did, and also the effect on your kids as well. So my parents were married for between 20 to 30 years, and 3 boys. I'm the middle child. And across our whole relationship, everything seemed fine. What would happen on occasion is I would see my mom just upset when she'd come home from work, and she'd almost be in tears. And we knew immediately what would happen. She was in a fight with my dad, right? But we'd ask her, and she says, "Oh, it's your father." And my dad, he had this MO, which he admits now that he would kind of just shut down and be quiet. That was his go-to when he was upset with my mom. But it would affect all of us. Like, he would shut down, he wouldn't talk to us. And over the years, this compiled up. And what happens is I talk about this emotional tipping scale. And in the emotional tipping scale, it's this idea that in her subconscious mind, in anyone's subconscious mind, you have these positive and negative emotional experiences. And every event you have with an individual gets deposited or withdrawn as a negative experience or deposited as a positive experience. And what happens over time is that Dr. Don Gottman says that every relationship that is successful needs a 5-to-1 ratio. It used to be 4-to-1, now it's 5-to-1. But over time, with all those fights and being quiet, and my dad working more and just not putting in the effort with my mom, becoming complacent, him admitting that as well.
Communication just disappeared. There was no communication. It was icy, cold shoulder.
Right.
And that my problem is I get complacent, and then I'll be honest with you, I get defensive. I mean, I got challenged a couple times, and I said, "Yeah, go ahead, do it. Let's see what happens." And that was just childish behavior on my part. I mean, so.
What happened is that this tipping point occurred with my mom when she viewed my dad. Here's the prime example I use is that when you call your wife and she sees your name on the phone, her immediate emotional reaction, without her even thinking about it, is how she feels based on this tipping scale. So in the early stages of the marriage, when she gets that phone call from you, she's happy, she's excited, she's exalted. And when looking at your history, she can only see the positive things. But once that tipping point occurs and you're more in negative sentiment override, all those past mistakes, all those bad things about you that she used to not care about, they become a big issue now, right? She alters the narrative to fit how she feels in the present. And what happens is, as my father said, he thought it was just another fight, that things would just kind of go back to normal because that was the pattern. But even though when she goes back to normal, the scale in the negative sentiment is getting deeper and deeper and deeper until eventually there's a crack. And the crack in that marriage is when someone else can either come in or she just finds a way out towards a different future without you because the pain is too much with you. So how did this crack occur and what happened? Now, in existential psychotherapy, they actually call this an awakening experience. And a lot of guys don't recognize, because they don't talk to other men, they recognize that this is such a common trope. So when this crack occurs, that's when the wife says, "I love you, but I'm no longer in love with you." Now, what created this crack, besides like just the constant fighting, was this awakening experience. Now, an awakening experience is some event in a person's life that has them, I can never snap perfectly the first time, has them question their existence. So examples of this, well, with my mother, my father, my grandpa, my mother's dad died, right? And he was like the archetype or the emperor of our family, if you will. Once the emperor dies, the kingdoms start to fall apart and there's a collapse, right? And a separation. And in that moment, my mom said, "Oh crap, my father just died." Someone who I thought was going to be present subconsciously for my whole life, he's been there. It makes you question your existence, how much time you actually have left, right? So most people, when they stop, and the wife stopped at this point, they're like, "Wait a second, I'm not happy with this man, and I haven't been." And seeing a death or an illness, a major illness in the family, or someone going through depression, or someone loses their job, or it's a milestone birthday like a 50th, 60th birthday, or a high school reunion, these experiences bring our limited life and the ephemeral nature of it to our face. We cannot deny it. We were so immersed in the forest, we couldn't see the trees. We were so immersed in the trees, we could not see the forest. But now that experience has us stop and say, where has the past 20 years of my life been? And she hasn't been happy. Now at that pause in my parents' relationship, right? She also saw her own sister, my aunt, going through the divorce a couple months ahead of us, and she divorced my uncle. So that also helped the process. But what my father has incorrect, what a lot of men have incorrect, is they think that, oh, the therapist or her single friends or her sister or her mother, your mother-in-law, they're all in her ear convincing her to leave you and they're enemies with you. That's not the case. You see, just like another man hitting on your wife, going after her, or these other people in her ear, they've always been there when she's complained. That guy has always been hitting on her for all those years. She's never told you. The only difference now is now she's questioning being with you, okay? Because of that crack, there's an opening for those opinions and that guy to come in. So it is such a fool's errand to think that it's the outside circumstances that have led to the separation. Because trust me, if that guy wasn't hitting on her high school boyfriend, or her single friends weren't in her ears, she'd find another way to confirm how she feels. Or some other guy like her boss, or some guy at the gym, or someone close to her. Doesn't matter, right? You can insert any of those people into that equation. The common denominator is that she is leaving you, and you must accept that if you want to get her back, you understand? So this leads to my next point after the awakening experiences, which is the harder you hold on, the more she slips away. Here's what my father said.
Your dad got, what's the word I'm looking for, complacent, and then he got defensive, and then he became a puppy dog, following everything around, and then came to grips with it, and then just accepted it. That was pretty much...
It's so interesting, like there's just something about our egos where when someone chooses, like you could be choosing to want to break up with your wife, right? Or you want to leave that person. And then as soon as they flip the tables on you, they actually leave you, then your emotions flip. You're like, maybe it's a bad idea. Maybe I should actually stay with them, right? It's crazy how this works. When someone leaves us, it triggers that abandonment, right? And for my father and like most men I work with, what happened is that you're like, oh, I just need to give her all this attention. I need to buy her roses, buy her flowers. Now I need to get in shape and do all these things that she's complaining about to show her that she's not going to leave me. I am valuable now. But here's the thing. This is the most unfortunate thing, which is now that she's in that negative sentiment override where she sees you as the villain in her story instead of the hero, anything you do goes through that filter of like, it's manipulative. Now that you're getting in shape, she sees that it's not for you. You're getting in shape for me. Oh, you're actually buying me roses for me just to get me back. And now she's seen that behavior through a needy lens. It's the whole idea that like you can hit on a woman at work and it's only creepy if you're not attractive, which is not true, but you get the point, right? Like you could take a guy who like stalks a woman, but if he's super attractive, he's not a stalker. But if he's like not attractive, then he's a stalker, right? But attraction isn't so black and white, by the way, with men. But the point is that the way she feels towards you dictates how she perceives that behavior in you. And once she has decided to leave emotionally, anything you do to try to get her back is seen as manipulation. But there is a way around this, okay? There is a way around this. My father actually said it in the conversation.
Let go. Be myself. Don't try to be something which I perceive she wants. Just be myself.
You see, for my mom, that high school boyfriend, he was always pursuing her. So my dad said for all those years, he didn't know about it, but she was always being pursued by him. But now that crack opened, and then he became needy, he only pushed her into his arms, right? And so what advice would I give my father across this timeline? If I can go back before my mom even decided to have that crack open in the relationship where everything tipped, I would tell my dad that very scenario, that thing is occurring. And I would show him examples of this happening all the time. We get so many guys who set up a call with us where they're in the same house, same bed, and They call us 3, 4, 5 months later saying, I should have went with you. I should have signed up, 5 months ago. I didn't think it was going to get worse, right? And because sex isn't as consistent, just because she's a little cold at times, but then we had sex that weekend when we went out on vacation, or she cuddled with me, or she wanted to buy me dinner, or whatever the case may be. Everything must be okay. It's like, no, she has parts of herself, this dual mind narrative, where she has this thing in the back of her head, right? Even though the positive voice for the most of your marriage is still above, where it's like, it's on the surface, what you're seeing most times. This is still growing like a cancer inside of her, that fear. And eventually it does overconsume the positive hope of it working out. And so what I would tell my dad is to recognize those signs and go into the marriage, have conversations with her. Because every time that you guys have fought, you decided to shell up, to not discuss things and just hope it would go away. But these are perpetual issues. And if you don't have the right tools to solve it, well, we know what happens at this point. She gets to that crack, that breaking point where, it's like the nail in the coffin. Now, even though it seems like it's a nail in the coffin, it's still not over when she does to make that final decision of like finding another guy. We say marriages all the time when this happens, but just like I said, where you're doing these things for her, okay? No. A lot of guys, when their wife decides to actually leave them, they feel empty, they feel left, they feel abandoned. They're just triggering that abandonment, that they're not good enough, that you're not good enough. You have to pause. And yeah, you haven't been good enough, okay? But if you start to do things to get her back, everything you do will be temporary, whether you think it or not. And so you have to pause first, okay? Once you have that pause and say, like, why is this actually happening? Let's look in the mirror. Let's look at really how this happened across my life. Like, what are the things I've done, why I've done it, why I let this marriage fall apart, why I become complacent, and how much she actually means to me. And when you can go deep into the true core reasons that we find, the man we work with, we give this assessment of like finding the core whys, the true core reasons why the wife is leaving him. It's not these symptom level causes that she's saying that you think that a therapist will tell you, okay? We found after thousands and thousands and thousands of marriages, the true core causes that actually leads a wife to actually leave, okay? And once you address those core root issues, you transform yourself into the man that does attract her back, because you're doing these things from a place that is not needing her, right? There's a healthy detachment in your actions. And ultimately, what attracts and brings your wife back to make her feel safe with you and trust you again is to become the man that does things for yourself, right? That has the higher purpose, that is able to express yourself authentically, to be the apex male that we talk about in this program, on this channel. And once you do that consistently, where you shift your focus on yourself, she'll start to see the guy as more fleeting, right? And that, remember that negative sentiment we talked about? You're investing positive emotional experiences on this other side of the scale, and you're shifting it back in your favor. And then she rewrites the narrative again, because a woman dictates her reality based on how she feels. And so if you shift how she feels, if you change her mood, you will change her mind. That's just the way it works, okay? You must embrace that as true. She's going to test you. She's going to make sure that you are that man that is making these changes. But when you're able to pass those tests and remain in who you are, attraction, a subconscious visceral attraction, is just a natural byproduct of all of that. This is when you finally have the CCC, right? Which is the corrective crucial conversation. It is a guided conversation script that I put in our program that is specifically laid out to guys in our program, okay? Based on your situation. I think the last piece of advice after having that corrective crucial conversation, which if you want an opportunity to have the conversation script, you have to join our program. So you can set up a call down below with our team. But the last thing I would tell my dad through all this at this time was to not listen to her words, okay? As men, we get so caught up in logic and reason, and we unknowingly don't realize that a woman can say a million things that can then contradict herself the next day. And you heard my dad talk about this kind of her giving him hope.
Sometimes you get false hope. You see things, or she'll say things that led to false hope. And I don't think she did it intentionally, she just did.
This dual mind narrative is where she is conflicted, as so are you, right? We are multifaceted beings, right? You have this voice that is going to work out, that there is hope, there is a future, but you also have that protection, that fear that is preventing you from getting you what you want. And unfortunately, in most situations, what people will default toward is listening to their fear and protection, because our ultimate goal is to survive as a species. And so in situations, right, you're always going to lean toward fear, protecting yourself if you're not conscious, then going towards what's best for you, because your brain only cares that you survive, not that you're happy. Your brain only cares that you what? Survive, not that you're happy. That's right. So that being said, you have to be able to cultivate this idea that she is playing out this inner narrative herself. And whenever she responds in fear herself, and if you reinforce that by going into why or arguing with her using logic, you're only reinforcing that narrative. But if you can lean more into your positive self, remaining conscious, having that space between her reactions and choosing yours as a man, what happens is that you're starting to reinforce that positive perspective in herself as well. And you show up as the man. You just show up as the man. There's no the man, not anything. You just show up as the man. So the last thing I would say to my dad, that I'll say to you, is to see this pain as an opportunity. And we can argue to the end of the world if it actually is or not, but it's a perspective, right? And your internal beliefs, who you are, reflects the external, which means that like everything you have in your life is because of all your thoughts, all your beliefs that you've had, all the emotions that you felt. So you have the capability to change that internal and then change the external, right? To question these inherent belief systems that you've adopted that created what you have right now. And that is the power of coaching, of listening to me, is having a different perspective. And from that new perspective, you take different action, okay? I'm here to help you if you want to take different action. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.